Hello, in this video, I'm going to show you a quick way to set up a probability table in Excel so we can simulate the random arrival of customers and let's say like, any store, coffee shop, wherever we're looking at. Okay, so I'm going to set up with this Excel file here. It's got a column called intro arrival time. So again, this is not the absolute arrival time, but the intro arrival time. So it's time between arrivals. We have the associated probabilities of these inter-arrival times occurring. Okay, so we're going to start with this table first. Um, the column we're going to need to generate is a cumulative probability column. So I'm going to call this the cumulative probability column. Okay, and again, the cumulative probability column is very easy. It's just the probability that you're less than the random variable is less than equal to the selected value. So for this one, what's the probability that the inter-arrival time is less or equal to 2? That's the sum of these two values over here. Okay, so you can just do this. You can add these two values. Okay, but really the easier way to do it is add the current probability and the cumulative probability of the previous value. Okay, so that when we copy this down, now pressing Shift down here to go down, select the cells as I scroll down. Okay, I'm going to copy the formula down by pressing Control D. Okay, and now all of these cells now they show the cumulative probability up to that value. So this is the probability that the inter-arrival time of a random arrival is 6 minutes, and that probability is 0.75, which is basically the cumulative for the previous value plus the current probability value. Okay, so this is your basic probability table. Okay, so we're going to use this table to generate the arrival of, let's say, the next 20 customers. Okay, so I'm going to start on the right-hand side here and create this customer or the simulation table. Okay, so this is be one here. Okay, the first customer arrival. Okay, and from this point forward, I can punch in 2, 3, etc. But that's, you're gonna have to punch in manually. I don't want to do that. So I'm going to set this cell to equals to the previous value, previous customer number plus 1. And then I'm going to press Shift down, scroll down to, let's say, maybe the 10th customer or the 11th. Let me erase the last. Let's do up to 20. Let's do it up to 20. So I'm just pressing Shift down and then Control D to copy the formula down. So all of these are just adding one to the previous row. Okay. So you have a list of 20 customers. Okay. Now I'm going to generate the simulated intro arrival for these 20 customers. Okay. So the way I'm going to do this is I'm going to use a rand function to create a random value and then look up that value in this table. Okay. So let's generate the random values first. So I'm going to use the rand function, built-in function. This generates a value from 0 to 1. It's a built-in function. So again, I'm going to press Shift down and then press Control down, copy the formulas down. Okay. And since this is, calling a function, every time you have an action, or you can press F9 here, it's going to update the random number value, which is okay. Okay, we're going to make this dynamic. Okay. So we have our set of random numbers that we can use to simulate this intro arrival time. Okay. All right. So what's the intro arrival time for the first customer? Okay. So I'm going to have to look up this random number value in this table. Okay. Or we're going to use a VLOOKUP table. Okay. But if you want to use the VLOOKUP table, the way the VLOOKUP table works is it's always going to look at the first column. Okay. In our case, we're trying to make it look up this random number respect to cumulative probability column, right? But actually the left hand, the lower end. Okay. So we're going to create basically just a temporary column here that we're going to use so we can look up our random number value. Okay, so I'm going to call this for now. Let's call it the lower bound. I'll call it the lower bound interval value. Okay, or this is basically the lookup value from this table. Okay, so for the first item here, for the first listed option here, this value would always be 0. Okay, if we're using these the decimal values. Okay, for the second one, it's going to be the lower end of the cumulative probability. So we're actually going to point it to the previous cumulative probability. Okay, because it's the lower end of the cumulative probability. Okay, so then the next one, then you're just going to press Shift down again to highlight, Control D, and now we have the column that we need to use a VLOOKUP table. Okay, so I'm going to show you how to set this up. I'll explain one more time how this works. So for the first customer, I'm going to use a VLOOKUP function. I'm going to tell Excel, look up this random number function, okay? And then go to this table array over here, okay? And then I'm pressing shift here to highlight things together. And then I'm going to press shift control down to highlight the whole column. And technically, I don't need this header here. I can actually start from the values here. And again, shift control down to highlight these two columns here, okay? And then I'm going to press F4 so I'll make an absolute reference. So when I scroll this formula down, you won't run into issues, okay? So as soon as I press F4, you see on the formula, there's absolute value signs. It's going to make an absolute reference to these cells here. So when you scroll down the formula, you won't run into an issue, okay? And then the third argument into this function is the column number, okay? In our case, it's the second column. It's the second column that we want to return, okay? So let me input that and explain this one more time, okay? So let's look at what this function is doing, okay? So yeah, the value was 4, okay? Once I do something, it's going to change. So again, I'll write the value here. The value was 4, right? Okay. So I'm going to highlight the formula here and see what this is doing. The Vlookup function is looking at this random number of 0.326352, okay, and then going to this table, okay, and then by default, Vlookup looks at the first column, okay. So it's looking at that first column and say, okay, which value is the closest value to the 0.36352 value, okay, without going over. So in our case, it's going to be this value right here, 0.3. That's the closest value without going over, okay. So it's not going to go to 0.6, okay. It can't go over, it can't be greater. The closest value that's smaller than 0.326 is 0.3, okay? Then you're telling Excel, go to the second column associated with that row, okay? So for this row, the second column is this one right here, so the value 4. That's why the returning value is 4, okay? If we select a bigger table, and then we can change this column number to 3 or 4, it'll return the associated column number, okay? All right, so let's run that and then press enter. And I'm gonna do a little shortcut here. I'm gonna press Control down, okay, to go down. And then I'm just gonna put just a temporary value, any value, okay. It doesn't matter what you put there, okay. I'm gonna press Control up to stop at the 4, and then from here I'm gonna press Shift Control down to highlight the formula down. The reason I put an arbitrary value down there is so that when I do Shift Control down, the selection will stop at this row here, okay. So once I'm there, I'm gonna press Control D. And it's gonna copy the formulas down. Okay, I'm gonna erase this value. So all of these cells now are looking up this table correctly, and it's finding the associated value associated with the random number. So in this case, 0.27. Without going over, it would have been 0.1 here. So the interval would have been 2. Okay. If I press something, this might change. The random number might change, so you might see a different value. But as it currently right now, behind this formula, the value you would see is 2. Okay. All right, so that changed because the random number changed, okay? So that's the inter-arrival time, okay? So then how do I set up the actual arrival time, okay? So the arrival time then, okay, the first for the customer is just the inter-arrival time. You're starting at 0, okay? But beyond customer 1, every other customer after that is the arrival time of the last customer plus the inter-arrival time of the current customer, right? So it's going to be equals to the last arrival time of the last customer plus the current inter-arrival time of the customer you're looking at. So in our case, it's this cell I4 here, okay? And now it's updated. So from time 0, 8 minutes later, the first customer arrived, and then 6 minutes after that, the second customer arrived. So the actual arrival time for customer 2 is minute 14, okay? So again, I'm gonna press Control down to go down, some arbitrary value here, Control up, and then Shift Control down, Control D to copy the formula down. Okay, so this is a basic way to how to create a probability table, generate a random number, and then pull the correct simulated inter-arrival time. And then you can use this for the service time and other things as well. But I've also shown you some shortcut keys. So hopefully this will help you as you work on these spreadsheet simulations for now. Okay. All right. So thanks for watching. And if you have any questions, feel free to reach out. Bye.